according to my own. Okay. So welcome. And here we are back in Duties of the Heart. Oh, got a little extra noise there. Not sure where that came from. There. Okay, I'm muting everybody. Okay. Okay, have everybody muted? Okay. Somebody's on. Okay. There, I muted everybody. So we are in the we're towards the end of chapter 9. We're kind of coming to the close of chapter 9, and we're in the middle of the discussion between the soul and the higher self, the soul and the higher intellect. We've just been he just described, he said, look, God has given you this most amazing equipment for you to be able to serve him, right? And he gave you, and he describes this thing as kind of like a royal palace. This royal palace, you have ministers and you have all sorts of things to help you, which is the body and your emotions and all of these things. You have a whole set of equipment that will help you in serving God if you choose to. And we end up, if you remember, we end up on the words, whereas you will find your helpers, attendants, assistants, and all those with whom you come in contact, conforming to your will and carrying out your desires. You may utilize them to increase happiness and joy. That's where we ended off. For those who are using this this text, we are going to be at the top of page 338, 339. 338, 339 in the first volume. I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. So now the intellect is in the middle of this discussion. So far, it's gone very well. He ended up on happiness, and he or she, I'm sure, ended up on happiness, and now we're going to kind of get the other side of the picture. I want to say one thing before we start. I started a little experiment based on this dialogue in my own Hidbodhut, in my own kind of meditation, my own sort of sitting with God and talking. I've tried to kind of see if I can hear an inner dialogue between my kind of my soul, my lower self, my ordinary self, and my higher self. And see if I can allow that conversation to take place, and if I can give my intellect, this higher intellect, a bigger voice. So I'm trying. It's not easy. I will say like anything else in spirituality, it's hit and miss. Sometimes I get there for a second, and I can kind of feel that that higher inner voice kind of speaking up, and other times I can't. So I'll let you know how my experiments go. I would encourage everybody to try this experiment at home. This is definitely a try at home type of experiment. So you can see how it goes. Okay. So now we've ended up on happiness. Now here's what he's going to say. It says all this, right? All this, this is all righteousness. This is all justice from your creator. In your hidden, says why? In your hidden thoughts and secret intentions, you chose either to rebel against him rather than serve him, or to serve him rather than rebel against him. So anything that happens, and this is all, you have this fundamental choice. Remember, he said that at the very beginning. He said that everything is about a fundamental choice, right? Three things. The first thing was, are you going to choose, and are you going to choose to serve God, or are you going to choose to rebel? And are you going to have the discipline, and the forbearance and the patience to be able to do what you need to do? It says, for your outward appearance and inward disposition are equally known to him, and he will repay you for what he observes in you, even if it remains hidden from other people. So do not see what a judge decides according to what has been established before him as fact, whether by witnesses or by his own senses, right? Do you not see that the judge decides according to what has been established before him as fact, whether by witnesses or by his own senses? If he could establish what was in the mind, he would also take that into account in his decision. So when it comes to your relationship with God, there's no difference between inside and outside. It's not like God just sees when you go to a human judge, the human judge only understands what he can know from his own observation or from the evidence that's presented to him, right? But God is able to see inside you and able to know your inner motivations, your heart, your and your struggles. So since the Creator, may he be exalted, knows everything equally, it follows that he judge according to his knowledge. As it says in the scripture, the hidden things belong to Hashem our God. Hanistarot LaHashem Elokeinu says, so the revealed things, right? We can see things on the outside, but he can see things on the inside. We see the outside of people, and he sees the inside. When the Creator wishes to rouse you and reprove you, he commands one of the assistants to leave your service, right? Illness then overcomes that member or several members or even all the members of your body, and it remains sick and painful until a certain time. If you awaken and return to him, he commands it to return to your service. He heals your body. So this is his kind of description of why it is that we suffer physical illnesses. Interesting, right? That is a wake-up call, a kind of wake-up call from God. Now, I'm not. I'm very hesitant. I'm very hesitant. You don't want to share this with the person who's in the hospital, please. Right? This is not. This is. You want to be careful. You want to be careful with knowledge. But so he says that. Listen, when you need a wake-up call, one of the advisors, right, one of the parts of this great palace of yours, okay, may go offline, maybe may stop functioning properly. And when you awaken and you return, he commands it to return to your service. He heals your body. It returns to its former condition, as it says in Scripture. And now he's quoting from Tehillim, from the book of from Psalms. This is one of the a very beautiful psalm, actually. Those who are sick on account of their way of sin, who suffer because of their transgressions, all food is loathsome. All food is loathsome to them, and they reach the gates of death. They cry out to God in their trouble. He delivers them from their distress. He sends his word and heals them, and saves them from what destroys them. So here it's associating those who are sick on account of their way of sin suffer, and therefore when they return, they're delivered of their distress. So now he turns to me and says, when your time of trial in this world comes to an end, and I love it, he says this so gently. Ka'asher yishlamu yemei nisyonech. When the time of your trial. So basically, he's defining being a human being in this world as a time of trial, right? Without making a big deal out of it. I'm making a big deal out of it, but he didn't, right? He just said, when you're done with the test of this world, which is what this world really is, the Creator may be exalted, commands all the officers, attendants, gatekeepers, servants, assistants to depart from you. The links and intermediaries between you and your body are cut off, and you return to your former state. Your body is left motionless and senseless. It too returns to its former state. As it says in Kohelet, in the book of Ecclesiastes, the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. So death is when all of the ministers leave you, when the palace closes its gates, and your physical body returns to its pure physicality, and your spirituality returns to its pure spirituality. You'll be shown the records of your deeds, thoughts and desires, and what you had chosen and preoccupied yourself with in your lifetime. And in accordance with this will be your requital. Okay, so this is the concept of reward and punishment. So you'll at the end of days, you'll be shown what you've chosen, right? What you've chosen to do. Hidrat nafshecha, what you've chosen and what you've busied yourself with, right? What you invested your time in, right? You'll get to see that, and so that will be, and based on that will be your repayment. He says he has already warned you and cautioned you about this through his messengers, prophets, and faithful Torah, as the wise man said. Again, he's quoting from the book of Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, King Solomon. Incline your ear and heed the words of the wise. Apply your heart to my knowledge, for it will be pleasant when you keep them in your belly. Have I not written you thrice in words of counsel and knowledge to show you what is right and true, that you may answer words of truth to he who sent you? Right? Answer words of truth to you who sent you. He's saying here, this is at the time. This is now talking about at the end of days. That you'll be able to give a proper accounting, give a proper accounting of yourself at the end of days, when you're shown what the things you cared about were. And this is, I think very often, when people kind of imagine this final reckoning, you're sitting in the divine movie theater being shown your life. The idea that he's presenting here is you're being shown what you chose, right? You're being shown what you invested yourself in, right? So there's an ultimate fairness in this, right? And when it says here your requital, it's really payback. It's absolutely fair. You're saying, okay, this is what you invested yourself in. This is what mattered to you. Okay. So now the soul asks a question. The soul turns and says, look, I've understood what you've said. I paid attention to all you've mentioned. He's a good student. Now I plead with your honor to explain to me on what occasions I should make use of my commendable and contemptible qualities, so that my use of them on these occasions will win me praise and commendation for their proper employment. So remember before, he was talking about, there was something very striking that he said before, and that he kind of moved on from. But he said, you in this palace of yours, you have contradictory qualities, right? You have anger and calmness, you have strictness, you have mercy, you have all these, you have these very different kinds of qualities. Now, obviously, if you're given those, now one argument you could say is, okay, well, maybe I'm just giving them for free choice, right? Maybe I have what would appear to be not so desirable options in order to allow me for free choice. Or maybe I have those options because those options are sometimes the right options, right? So he says, what? So now you're saying I have these meshubach and meguna. I have these qualitative and negative. I have these qualitatively positive, qualitatively negative traits. When do I use them? So the mind says, you possess many different qualities. I will speak briefly of those that occur to me. Right? He's not going to be exhaustive. Very often in this book, he warns us, I'm not being exhaustive, just giving you a sense of the terrain. This is a map. It's not the territory. So you possess many different qualities. I will speak briefly of those that occur to me. Two of your qualities are joy and grief, which are opposites. This is the way joy should be employed. Okay, listen carefully. When you secure enduring delight in which there can be no sorrow and which is not subject to any mishap, you may release this quality. So he says, joy should be over something which is lasting. Joy should be over something that's going to, something that's not eventually going to bring you sorrow, right? So if you're eating that gigantic chocolate cake, okay, your joy is wasted on that gigantic chocolate cake if you know that it's going to make you puke later. Okay, I shouldn't use the word puke. That's not really nice. But that's a waste of that's a waste of joy, because really what it is, it's just a joy that precedes sorrow. So you should reserve your joy for those things which are going to be lasting and not going to give you sorrow in the future. The way to use grief is as follows. When something happens to you which is troubling and enduring, and which you can neither remove nor escape, you may release grief and make use of it. Wow. Okay. So when something is troubling and enduring, when something when it says kayam tamid, there's nothing you can do about it, right? You can't push it away. There's nothing you can do about it. So grief, right, is reserved for things, right? Just like we said with happiness, you said with happiness. Happiness is for those things which are which is an enduring happiness, right? We should invest our joy in things which are enduring. It says, and grief is appropriate when there's just no way out, right? But if there is a way out, if there's a way of, which I think almost always there is, but not always. But if there is a way out, if there's a way, then that grief is not appropriate. But when there's no escape, he says, then he says, and I wish he were here with me so I can ask him this question, because what he says here is v'hit v'hishtam shibo, hishtam shiba, like, and make use of it. Like, what does that mean? I have no idea. Like how, like because that's a word that you would use for like using a tool, right? To make use of something. Like, I'll let you stir, that around in your brain a little bit. What does it mean to make use of? You can release grief. And literally he says, Hatiri gam ke midat heva. He says this, you can also literally release, let go of grief, right? Because you're holding it back, and make use of it. I feel like there's something deep there, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know exactly what that is. Maybe one way to think about it is that maybe grief, I don't know. Maybe grief is a way of kind of resetting ourselves. When we're in a situation, where there's nothing we can do about something. It's a done deed. There's just nothing we can do. Maybe the expression of grief is our way of kind of putting a closure, putting a seal on that experience, and processing that experience, and then being able to move on to other experiences. I don't know. I have to think about it. It's a beautiful idea to use grief. I'm not sure what he means. Okay, two other qualities of yours are fear and hope. So the place for fear is when you are confronted with an unavoidable, painful situation, the end of which will not be good for you, and which you have no strength or power to avert. Right? The occasion, right? So if you're in a situation where something is going to happen to you, and there's nothing you can do about it, fear is appropriate. He says, I think too often we get afraid Too often we get afraid in situations in which the pain is not inevitable, and in which we probably we may have more control over the situation than we think, right? Part of what happens with fear is fear can help you, can make you think that you don't have control when you do have control, right? You're the the fear response, the fear response of your of your reptilian brain, right, can make it impossible for you to make decisions, can do lots of things so that you have less control over what you're doing. The occasion for hope is when you engage in the preliminaries that will bring you what is good and lead to what is pleasant, which no one can prevent and nothing can keep from you. That is when, for instance, you fulfill the commandments of which the Almighty has commanded on account of their good end. So when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right, and there's nothing standing between you and your goal, that is a good time. That's a good time to be. It's a good time to be hopeful. It says two other qualities of yours are courage and timidity. Gvura, and morech, yeah, I guess, yeah, timidity. I guess it's almost like fear, but okay. Trying to think of another word for that. Okay, we'll go with timidity. The right occasion for showing courage is when you meet the enemies of God in order to fight them, and bearing any hardship or trial for the will of the Creator may be exalted, and the will of his pious ones, as is written, because of you we are slain all day long, regarded as sheep for the slaughter. Okay, just in case you wondered whether Judaism had some extreme language in it, here you go. Okay, we have we're not lacking for extreme language. And says, when is courage? Courage is when you're fighting, when you're struggling with the Oivei Hashem, with the enemies of enemies of God, and okay, and when you're bearing a hardship or trial for the will of the Creator, when you're struggling and you're suffering for the will of creators and for the will of his pious ones, for his Hasidim, it says, because you are slain all day long, guard as sheep for the slaughter. Let the righteous man strike me in kindness and rebuke me. The occasion for timidity. So he's saying that there is a place, right? There is a place for courageous action, right? There is a moment when a person, when they really need courage, and there's a time when you need timidity. The occasion for timidity is when you meet those who love God, not to fight them, or those devoted to his service, not to stand up against them, who reproves you for your own good. So when somebody is correcting you for your own good, right? That's a moment for it to have timidity. That's a moment to have a gentle shyness, to tone down your fight response, right? To tone down and to be able to listen. As it says, because your heart was soft and you humbled yourself before God. So there's a time when we need to have courage, and there's a time when we need to have softness. Now we have another pair of qualities, one of my favorites. He says, among your qualities is the pair shame and brazenness. Now, I'm always, ever since the advent of the famous Brene Brown, I've been very cautious about using this word shame, because she makes an interesting distinction. I don't know who she is. She's kind of a popular psychologist, self-help type person who talks a lot about the concept of shame. And one of the things she says is that while guilt focuses on something that we have done, shame focuses on who we are. right? And shame is enduring and will tend to affect everything that we do. Whereas guilt is something which can actually help us to correct our actions, something which can kind of guide us in our kind of navigation of the moral universe. But usually, what we call shame can be crippling, unfortunately. Um, and so I'm not sure this word bullshit actually means this. I think really here, the word here, shame, means a kind of bashfulness. Um, not the opposite of brazenness. So I don't know what to call it. I'm just gonna call it, I'm not sure what I'm gonna call it yet. Okay. So among your qualities is this pair of uh not sure. Okay, we'll call it shame for the moment, but please remember it's not that kind of shame, and brazenness. Azut, this is az means strength. Azut is brazenness. Sometimes I'll explain it in a second. The place for shame is when, for all his kindness, you rebel against your benefactor in front of him and in his presence, when he rebukes you with his warnings for good and bad, when you meet his prophets, and it says, and he quotes from Yechezkel from the book of Ezekiel. He says, you, son of man, tell the house of Israel about the house, that they be ashamed of their iniquities. And then from Ezra, it says, my God, I'm embarrassed and ashamed to lift up my face to you, my God. So when you're embarrassed, I guess that's actually a better word. Bullshit, kind of an embarrassment. When we're embarrassed before God, because we've rebelled against God, because we've ignored God, um, even though we knew better, even though we got the message, even though things were clear to us, then we have a kind of embarrassment. Now, brazenness. So brazenness is this thing of azut. There's a beautiful in Pirkei Avot, which is a collection of the teachings of the rabbis from the 1st and 2nd centuries on issues of ethics and spirituality. There are two very interesting verses. There's one verse that says you should be az kenemer. You should be bold as a leopard, right? You should be bold as a leopard in serving of God. And then there's another one that says, right? It says azul panim legehenim. This is as a person who is shamefaced. All right, a person who is brazen-faced, right? A person who's brazen goes to hell. Now they're really the same word, right? They're both the same word. The word for bravery and the word for brazenness is actually the same word. And those two verses, and you have those two verses. So it seems like it's interesting. So Rabbi Nachman of Breslov talks about this idea, and he says, look, he says, there are two kinds of brazenness. There's a brazenness that comes in the service of God, azut the kedusha. There's a holy brazenness. There's a holy courage, right? When we're engaged in the service of God, and he said you have to be in action. You have to be stubborn in the service of God. To really serve God, you have to have a certain stubbornness. You have to have a certain forbearance. You have to push forward, even though there's a lot coming against you, right? Whenever you do anything in spirituality, there's always going to be an equal but opposite force that's pushing against you. So you have to be able to keep moving forward and to deal with your obstacles. Okay, that requires a braveness, right? Or it can be that the world around you makes obstacles. It could be that whatever it is, that you have to have a certain strength and a certain bravery. Okay, but that same quality, right? That same quality can also turn into arrogance, right? That very same quality can also be arrogance. So exactly the same quality of brazenness, right, can be a positive thing and can be a negative thing. right? It can be both. So here he's talking about when it is that, right? Here he's talking about when it is you need it. So is in a place when meeting the wicked, sinners, and those who oppose the truth, when urging people to loving kindness, right? Which is really interesting. He says you don't have to be shy in urging people to loving kindness. How interesting is that? That you add this, that you put this word, right? This word brazenness, this word bravery into, right? That we should be actively, right? We should be proactive in encouraging other people to acts of kindness. This is not just, we're not just sort of sitting around, right? We have to work hard. It says warning them to avoid what is reprehensible when you shame sinners. I don't recommend this for most of us. Shaming sinners and rebuking people, it's not recommended. Yeah, Nathan, is that a hand up? Come on in.
Okay. Sorry if this is too proud and arrogant of me. I've been trying to follow along in the original Arabic,
Okay.
and I think I found the word for he uses for shame, and I wonder if perhaps this audience knows a connotation for haya. I was surprised because it looks
Oh,
like life, but
no.
when I
Haya
looked it up in
means
Hans Fair,
that's actually a great, haya means modesty, right? Yeah. Like if you say, like if you say somebody doesn't have haya, it means um like no modesty. Yeah, that's a great,
I thought this would help.
yeah, that's a great, I mean, let's put it this way. Uh, yeah, shame in that sense, right? Like when you say a person has no, yeah, it's very positive, right? You say a person who has haya is a person who is modest, a person who kind of is careful about what they do and how they present themselves, right? And it's yes. It's I think about like what's the I I'm having a hard time finding the appropriate bullshit. I think comes close in Hebrew, but it's not exactly there. Thank you for looking that up. That's great. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Um, that makes perfect sense. That does. Well, we'll just use the Arabic now. Ah, yeah. So that's okay. Um, okay. So we have to be brave in urging people to loving kindness and warning them to avoid what's reprehensible, shame sinners when you rebuke the small and the great, right? So when you come to the point where you have to speak up, okay, don't be shy. It says, I have set my face like flint, and I know I will not be timid. Lo evosh, I'll not display this timidity. So two other qualities are anger and contentment. So what's nice about this, right, is, and by the way, it's kas and ratzon. Um, um, yeah, contentment, serenity. Yeah, like contentment is a good translation. Yes. Okay. So two qualities are anger and contentment. So in case you thought anger had no place, congratulations, it actually does have a place. So for those of us who have tempers, okay, don't despair. Don't despair. There's a use for it. Um, there are two other qualities, anger and contentment. Anger in place where there is deviation from the way of truth and the rule of righteousness, when falsehood prevails over truth and those who follow it. So righteous anger, right? There is a place for righteous anger. Um, yeah, as he points out, right? Haya also is related to hayat, which means life. Yeah, they're etymologically related, which is interesting. Okay, so contentment is in place when all things are done properly, are put in the right place, and observed according to the ways of truth. So when the world is good, I'm not sure when that ever was, but in that short moment when the world is everything is in order and everybody is doing as they should, and then we can have contentment. But when we see that the world is a mess, there is a place for anger. Now, by the way, when it comes to anger, I'll add the caveat in my 1 minute um, that that Maimonides, the Rambam, says that while we have lots of different qualities, and they're on a spectrum, and there are different people who require these at different times. He says anger is never good. He says one of the things is anger just is bad. It says in the book of Job, I say, are you going to tear your soul in your anger? Right? There's a thing that anger does to us where it just tears us up. We just get it can be so destructive that he says you should never get angry. Now he says, well, but you should never get angry, but you can show anger, right? Which means you can pretend to be angry. Like, so for example, if you need to change something, right? If you need to change something, you have children who are misbehaving, right? Or you have some situation that requires you to put on that face, right? To put on an angry face, you can put it on an angry, right? Put an angry face. It reminds me of a story. I'll end with the story. The story goes, I heard this story in India. It's a nice little story. The story was that there was this cobra. And this cobra, there was this guru who was preaching to all the animals. And he said to all the animals, he said, listen, you guys, you have to stop with the violence. Okay? No more violence. This jungle is a mess because of all your violence. So I want you to stop. Okay? Stop with violence. And this cobra was very, very, very touched by this message. And he said, from now on, no more violence for me. And so along came a mongoose, right? And the mongoose started to fight with him, and he says, no. I said, I'm not fighting back. And the mongoose tore him apart, right? He's ripped him apart, he's bleeding, and he goes back to the guru, right? He goes back to this guru and he says, do you see what you did to me? You told me no, he says, you told me no violence. And so he started, this mongoose attacked me. I didn't even bite him back. I didn't even bite him back once. And the guru says, you know what? Says, I said you couldn't bite. Says, but I never said you couldn't hiss. I said you couldn't bite, right? But I never said you couldn't hiss. So yes, you're not allowed to do maybe you can't do violence, but maybe you don't want to really get angry, right? But you're allowed to show an angry face. You're allowed to use a kind of righteous anger in order to make the world a better place. So we could stop there with that weirdo story. And questions, thoughts, objections, suggestions, tomatoes. Okay, we learned a new Arabic word this week. And if anybody has any, yes, Yonasan, and then Mitra. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm on mute now. When we were talking about using grief, what popped into my mind are these stories of people where there's been a tragedy, a child dies, there's accident, something like this, and out of that comes some sort of a project to stop it. I thinking, for example, of there was a case where a kid got sucked down to the drain in the bottom of a pool and couldn't get loose and drowned. And then out of that came legislation requiring certain safety devices on swimming pools so that this wouldn't happen again. And so it's not that they ever really get beyond the loss of a child. It's always going to be there. But moving beyond the stage of grief, moving beyond the stage of grief towards using that to better the world in some way. That's what popped in my mind. So maybe that's a possibility.
Oh,
I think
nice.
Jonathan's right there. That came to my mind as well.
Okay, that's great. I hadn't thought about that. Like the Sandy Hook parents, who have been working on all this. Mitra John, Mitujul?
Highly.
Hi.
Yeah, in the same, they're talking about the same subject of the use of grief. What came to my mind, in addition to what our friends just suggested, which is beautiful, using it to propel yourself towards positive action. There is another inner possibility, which is if you surrender to it, it brings you, just like Job when he surrendered, you get incredible benefits inwardly. It increases your capacity for compassion. It increases your capacity to receive God's grace, because these things always go hand in hand. There is balance in the universe. So if you've been given such a horrendous grief, the balance of it is right there waiting. And so I think that's the message of the story of Job, when he gets so much more back after he has gone through that humongous grief and loss, and he surrenders to it. The word Islam, of course, is surrender. So
Right.
it's that's just my 2 cents. I think it might be the use of grief in that sense.
That's a beautiful thought. That's a beautiful thought. I'm sorry that Aline is not here this week. She's Shia, and I think that's grief is a huge part of their spirituality. That's kind of a very big part of their. I would be interested to see what she had to say about that. So,
Yes.
okay. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you guys so much, and everybody knows where to find me. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And I'll see some of you on Monday. I'll see some of you on Wednesday, and some of you in between. And thank you very, very much for coming. And it makes me so happy to see you guys every week. And Jan, I'll see you on Shabbat. Okay. Bye.
Thank
Shalom.
you. Assalamu alaikum.